Hey, patrons. It is me again, Abby, and I'm super excited to be here with you with one of my favorite foragers, Linda Black Elk. And we just recorded a podcast for the podcast Wonder Forage and Wildcraft, which y'all support. So thank you so much for that. And as promised, here is your bonus interview. So Linda so kindly offered to talk to us about fermenting foods and how to make it accessible for all of us, even in the midst of overwhelm and other challenges, which she's going to talk about as well. So, hey, Linda.
Hi. Yep, I'm so excited. I have to say that all around me, like this is real. This all around me right now, my husband is cooking in the kitchen. My 7-year-old is eating like, a foot and a half away from me. So if you all hear activity going on, that's because this is real life.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me, though.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So, I know that I hear from a lot of people, a lot of my audience and followers that they're like, they watch my feed and they're like, geez, how do you have time to do all this? And in the podcast, we were talking about green onions, and I actually like wild onions, and I actually just recorded something yesterday saying like, hey, I know y'all feel overwhelmed to try and get forageables into your diet, or like people always ask me what percentage of your diet is foraged, or how can I get started? And I like to bring it back to the basics and just let people know like you can simply just harvest wild onions and cut them up and throw them onto your eggs or whatever you're eating. And I think that in some ways it's probably similar with fermented foods. So just jump right in and tell us your thoughts.
Awesome. Yeah, I get that all the time. Like, whenever I make a Facebook post, it's like, how do you find time to preserve this stuff? How do you find time to cook this stuff? How do you, and so I want to make it clear, like I'm a mom of 3 and I teach full time. I work full time. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter. I am a sister, an auntie. And so I have cultural, familial work obligations all the time. I teach, but I also take classes. And so I'm an extremely busy person. And so I always get, like all of us are. But I get questions often about how I find the time. And what I always say is, first of all, be aware of how much time you spend on your phone or on a game or something like that, because it's oftentimes a lot more time than you think. And all I'm saying all I'm asking people to do is spend 1 hour a day, doing some type of effort into food sovereignty in your everyday life. 1 hour towards some food preservation activity. And that includes fermentation. Now, I do have a lot of friends. I am neurodivergent myself. I am ADHD, and which I consider a gift and also like sometimes a hurdle to get over. But I have a lot of friends who say I have really debilitating anxiety. And the whole idea of like spending an hour doing anything other than sitting on my phone, it seems impossible to me. And that is something else. There are actually amazing herbs that can help with focus, that can help with anxiety, that can help with depression. And I do understand that there are other reasons than time that keep people from practicing food preservation. And so if anyone has any questions or wants to talk through that or talk through strategies, let me know, because I love to talk about that. It's tough, but sometimes it takes, you can also, something that I've found that helps me is to do it with other people. So if I have someone say, I'm going to come over there for an hour twice a week, or, like if my husband, says, nope, I'm going to push you, like, and say, hey, nope, this hour, you and I are going to do this together, that really helps a lot. So, one of the primary food preservation techniques we use in our home is to ferment everything. You can ferment fruit as well as vegetables. A lot of people don't realize fermenting fruit is a thing. You can do that. And there are different kinds of fermentation, right? There's making vinegar is a type of fermentation, making fermenting with salt. Lacto fermentation is one type. And you can also ferment with sugar, different types of sugar, whether it's honey or maple syrup, or white sugar. We try not to use white refined sugar in our home, but if you want to do some type of sugar fermentation, you can do that. And you can get organic raw cane sugar as well, which I think is a better alternative than white refined sugar. So, but fermentation, really the actual activity that you do usually just takes a couple of minutes. The fermentation that's happening can take a long time. So, for example, here's a jar of kimchi that we made over a month ago, and this has been going for a while. And to me, it's just now ready. But making this kimchi took maybe 15 minutes. So that's fine. And if you don't like spicy, I'm gonna reach. You can make kimchi without spices too. These are mustard greens that have been fermenting for like 2 years. And they're delicious. So you can ferment anything. Sorry, this is a sugar ferment, and these are green wild plums that we put in a jar with sugar. This is organic cane sugar. And this makes a beautiful syrup. In Korean, it's called maeshilcheong. Fermenting with sugar is a big thing in Korea. And you can do it with almost anything. People make cheongs out of everything from pine needles to green wild plums, so to make all these different syrups. And then you can use these in all kinds of recipes, or you can put a spoonful of this in hot water to make a tea. And it's amazing. So, if you can just devote a little bit of time, you can have all kinds of ferments, and it really helps. Like people have asked me, what does kimchi mean to you? As someone who's part Korean, like, what does kimchi mean to you? And it doesn't just mean culture, and it does, but it means culture, and it does mean language, and it means connection, and it means delicious food, and it means gut health. But really, for me, it's survival. Preserving these vegetables so that you can have them all winter long is about, thriving and surviving. And so, it's that important, because being able to preserve these things for when they're not in season is really important. And that's one reason why fermented foods are so important. But fermented foods are so important nowadays for people because we have destroyed our gut health with colonized foods like white sugar and dairy and food, preservatives and food colorings and things like that have destroyed our gut microbiome. And if we want to regain a healthy gut microbiome, we really need fermented foods in our lives. So I ferment everything. And basically what I do, I would say, if I had to say one thing that's key to fermentation, let's talk lacto fermentation first, fermenting with salt. If I had to say one thing, it's make sure you add enough salt. Because I just 2 days ago, I had a lady say to me, I made kimchi and it molded. And, the reason that happened is because she did not add enough salt, and she did not make sure that every part of the cabbage she was using, the Napa cabbage she was using, got salted. when you see Korean women, especially elders, making kimchi, they will lovingly put salt on every single leaf. And we're talking about, you know, women who will ferment thousands of pounds of cabbage and other vegetables every year. And they will lovingly go through and salt every leaf from the smallest to the largest. And that's really probably the most important thing I can say is make sure you add enough salt. It should taste like the ocean. So yeah. So I guess that's, you know, all that I wanted to say, but fermenting, people overcomplicate it all the time. And the thing that I like to get people to remember is that, the thing I like to get people to remember is that it's, you know, don't be scared. You just have to try it. You just have to do it. It's much worse to let that fear of messing up paralyze you. That's much worse than, you know, working to just go ahead and do it. And don't be afraid of failure, right? I think something that a lot of people see is they'll develop. I actually have people send me pictures all the time. They're like, oh, my ferment is molding, and there'll be a white film on the top. That's not mold, that's yeast. And that's not a bad thing. You know, if it disturbs you, just spoon it off. But the white stuff is yeast, it's not mold. So that's what I would say. Just don't be scared. Just do it. Put a little bit of time into it. Try it tonight. Just, you know, cut up some carrots, put them in a jar with some salt water. It's usually 2 tablespoons of salt per quart of water is a pretty good place to start. And you can try fermenting anything that way.
Yum. Thank you for adding that little recipe, because I think that gives people a quick, easy way to start.
It's quick and easy. Exactly. Just make that brine and put it over everything. Put it over some garlic tonight, you know, if you want. And then what you do from there is totally up to you and your own creativity. You want to put some black peppercorns in there? Great. If you want to do turmeric fermented garlic, do that. You know, put in a nice piece of turmeric into there, and it'll be a golden yellow colored pickled garlic. It's gorgeous.
And so for the garlic, do you use the same recipe as you just told us for the carrots?
Yep. 2 tablespoons of salt per quart of water. That's your basic brine. And you can pretty much put that on anything. Now, you will see a lot of like fermentation masters who will weigh out their salt, they'll weigh out their ingredients, and then they'll decide how much salt to put in. And I'm a big believer in that. And I think that that's wonderful. But for those of you who don't have time, the energy, you know, the mental, you know, space to do that right now, start off with 2 tablespoons of salt per quart of water, and that can usually get you by with pretty much anything.
And then you're putting the lid on that jar?
Yep. Yeah. But not a tight lid. So you can also, I wanted to show you these things are amazing. They actually sell fermentation lids these days for, they're made by the Ball Company, and they have a little fermentation lock on there kind of where the gas can escape. So I can put this lid on here tight, and there won't be a problem. If you don't have a fermentation lid, that's fine. You can still ferment things. Don't let not having the right, remember, people have been doing this since the beginning of time. You don't need fancy equipment or anything to be able to do this. You know, if you just have a jar with a lid like this, just don't put it on tight. Take the flat part and just lay it on there, and the gas can escape. Don't make the mistake of putting the lid on too terribly tight while something is fermenting, because it will build up gases in there, and you'll notice that it'll start to bow at the top, or worse, it'll explode. So you don't want that to happen. Not that I know from experience. I do know from experience. We actually made a batch of elderberry elixir once, and we left it out instead of putting it in the fridge, and it fermented to the point where it basically became, a mead. I'm sure eventually, but not before the entire thing exploded and put elderberry elixir in glass all over the cabinet where we had it. So
Same experience. I took some elderberry elixir that I made as an oxymel, so with vinegar and honey, to Florida, and it was in pop top bottles, and it started to ferment because it was so warm, and it exploded. So
yes.
Y'all don't do that.
Yep, and oxymels will do that too. Oxymels are they ferment as well, so, and it's beautiful. I love doing it, but it's just important to remember that it will happen.
So you just leave that jar out on the counter for how long?
About 2 weeks, and that's my favorite fermentation point, is about 2 weeks. And then I'll keep it in the fridge to slow down the fermentation process. And so if you don't like your kimchi or your ferments to be extremely sort of sour, just put them in the fridge and let them ferment slowly. My husband, I have kimchi that is years old, years and years. And I grew up using that very, very fermented kimchi. It kind of gets a little soft, and it's you open the jar and all of a sudden the whole house smells. I love to use that stuff in soup. That's what I grew up doing. My husband likes fresher kimchi. So actually we'll take one of the jars when we make a bunch of big jars. We'll take one of the jars and keep it in the fridge the whole time, and he'll eat from that. And it ferments very, very slowly. It'll last for months that way, and still feel fresh.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you. That is just a bunch of amazing education. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah. And y'all check out the podcast for sure. I'll put a link in the notes. And let us know in the comments what you think, if you try it, and if you have any questions or comments. So thanks again, Linda, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.